you back. Greetings. Oh my goodness. Happy new moon. I am calling you back to you today. I'm calling you back. That is what today is all about. Okay? Welcome to the Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space with the Midwifery Folklorist. I am Priestess Okunchola Amadou. I am a midwifery folklorist. I am a museum scholar, a midwifery historian, and I am here to restore, archive, uplift, and normalize our sacred spiritual midwifery practices, especially our pre-colonial practices, which unfortunately are almost extinct. So we gather here at the Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space every other week on the new and full moon. Typically, I'm up at 4 a.m. channeling our cosmic, ancestral moon wisdom, reading from books, reading from archives, or even bringing you new information. And today I was up at 4 a.m., but I'm actually recording the oral archive a little bit later than that. When I was up at 4 a.m., I was taking care of myself and doing some personal things to align myself with this day. I believe I woke up around 3-ish a.m. today. But today's oral archive is taking place on the new moon in Taurus. So today is Sunday, April 27th, and the new moon the moon actually entered Taurus around 2:17 a.m. Central Time today, and the new moon peaks at let's see. I gotta look at my Eastern and Central times at 2:31 p.m. Central Time. I want to give you the right information. So this oral archive will go live right at the new moon time. And so our new moon today is in Taurus. Taurus is a fixed earth sign, so it's an earth sign that is governed by the planetary energy of Venus. And we know Venus to be a planet of divine femininity, of sacred feminine principles, that speaks of love and peace and nurturing and balance. And we know Taurus to be a very grounded, resourceful zodiac energy. It's a cosmic star energy. And so that Taurus store body really invites us into grounding in our abundance, our wealth, counting our blessings, removing things that can take you off your square to wealth and abundance and prosperity. And so aligning that with the new moon and with the power of the divine feminine, it brings us quite a few messages today. And so before we go further, I actually was called to an old archive of mine that I wrote in 2012. So I began journaling many years ago. And so this journal is from 2012. And typically our oral archives, I am not on video. I am not on camera. I am just talking to you in front of my shrines. But today I'm coming to you from my study, and behind me is one of my personal libraries. And and on my library shelf, I have some of my own journals from over the years. So you'll see this is very old. And but this journal chronicles my evolution into becoming a goddess. 2012 is the year I had my home birth, so it also talks about me getting ready to raise money for my home birth, me planning for my mother blessing ceremony, me planning for my baby's naming ceremony, how I came up with my baby's name and what it meant. I even in my archive journal, I even talked about what Orisha would be governing my son. And at that time, I was not initiated. I have in here written that he is a child of Shango. And by golly, I had my godmom to determine his Orisha last year. And he's a child of Shango, honey. Listen, and I just read that again today. Like, oh my goodness, I love myself. But I know you love yourself too. So I will be opening us up today in sacred prayer from a prayer that I wrote in purple, because y'all know I love purple. But this is a prayer that I wrote in 2012. Now, typically I'm really good about putting dates on my entries, and by the looks of this, I wrote this in April. Of course I did. I wrote this of April of 2012. So here, this is April 18th of 2012 at 12:30 p.m. That is when I wrote who my midwife for my home birth was going to be. So Allison Midwife. And I also am chronicling all of the star body zodiac systems and the correlation of the chakras with those systems, the correlation with the herbs and the essential oils. So you all can see I've been doing this a very long time. So just a page or two over is the divine prayer I'll read to you today. It's about the divine feminine. It's so appropriate for us having a new moon in Taurus governed by this beautiful feminine energy of Venus. So I invite you to lower your eyelids, close your eyes, whatever feels good for you, and we will open our sacred space. Unto the goddess, ancient, cosmic, heavenly, embodied on earth. I am she who breathes the wind of air, Shakti woman, power flowing. I am she who set a blaze of life and death, the spark of creation, transformation, regeneration, heat of passion and love. I am she who swims in the depths of the womb, moisture and fertileness of the moon, and lavish full oceans and streams of rain. I am the earth, the mother, the nurturer, she who grows and cultivates and raises the land. Our people and vibrations. I call upon the passionate depths of the elder goddess energy since the beginning of creations and vibrations to arise within me. My soul, my heart, and my mind feel me. Dance within my space. I am her. Today, every moment of existence, she who I wish to find is within. She is me and I am I. Ashe, meaning I call in that power. So today's reading from my personal archive centers us around today's message. One of today's biggest messages is that we are our own goddesses. If you are a midwife, or if you're just a woman or a person listening to this message and this oral archive today, I want you to understand that it is very important that today you ground your feet in the Taurus energy of the moon. And you ground your feet boldly. And you stand nice and strong and tall. Okay? You stand up. You stand up and you recognize that you have an Ori. When you think about the word Orisha, Orisha is what we call the divine primordial energies of the planet that have manifested sometimes in human bodies and that is responsible for all the bounty and beauty we see on this planet and throughout the universe. But guess what? Orisha starts with Ori. And we call our Ori in our traditional African pathways, we call our Ori our first God, our goddess, our highest power. So that means that before you honor another Orisha, before you honor another God, before you honor another goddess or deity, you first have to honor your own goddess, which is you, your own Ori. Your higher soul is the divine being that you're looking for. That last line that I wrote all those years ago, that called me to pull it off the shelf this morning, I sat right here on the floor and I was like, what are y'all telling me today? Where am I being called to out of all of the books here? And I was pulled to this. And I wrote this exactly, what is this, 2025, 13 years ago, almost the same exact time. And it says, again, I am her today, every moment of existence. She who I wish to find is within. She who I wish to find is within. She who I wish to find is within. So for some of us who are looking, I wrote on the top of the couple pages over who my midwife was. I was looking for a special kind of midwife. And I found the midwife, but I did not find the midwife that I was looking for. But guess what I'm doing 13 years later? I am the midwife that I needed then. And even if I never have another baby, I am who I looked for, right? I am a priestess of Mami Wata. I'm a priestess of Olukun, Yemoya, Obatala, and Egbe. So these are all sacred, secret initiations that I've gone through in different houses across the planet with different elders and different people who have initiated me. And I am so grateful to all of the different elders who have taken part in my initiations. And I've also experienced some things that I shouldn't have in the path of my initiations. And so I told myself, when I am called to finally be a mother of a temple and initiate other people into the secret pathways of being a priestess and a midwife, I know that I am going to be the priestess that I needed when I was on my path. Again, she who I wish to find is within. So when I was looking for a special type of person to guide me, to lead me, to have high integrity on this path, and I didn't find it, and I left those different spaces, I created what I needed within myself through my Ori, right? And then now I can be that for other people because I've done it within myself first, okay? When it comes to love, and I'm a person that I'm going to guide you through truth. I'm not going to guide you through anything I have not experienced and I don't have wisdom and medicine for. When it comes for love, I've had my fair share of putting people before me in love and taking care of people more than I'm taking care of myself and ignoring red signs, red flags, right? And I took over 2 years of being celibate before I married my current husband, who is a gem, right? But I took 2 years of loving myself. I did everything alone. I traveled alone. I took myself to the best places I could imagine. And that meant that when someone else came along, I was not looking for them to do anything that I hadn't done for myself. Not that I couldn't do, not that I wouldn't do, but that I had not done for myself. I had done everything for myself, right? So what I am sharing with you today before we move into the readings that I have, because I have some readings for our oral archives. Sometime it's what spirit calls down. Sometime I'm reading from something that already exists and tying it into context. But I want you to understand the focus is on getting back to center. honoring the secret and the sacredness of who we are, honoring our ori, right? And reclaiming what belongs to us through this feminine moon. So our abundance and our wealth, anything that is pulling us away from that, we have to move it. So now that we've opened the way through that sacred reading, I will give just a little bit more information around the new moon energy, and then I will go into a couple of really important points here. I've got my other couple of books here. So, few things. Today is the 27th, and so we understand that we are in a new moon. When we are in a new moon, that means that the sun and the moon and the earth are all in alignment. That means that the moon is at 0%, meaning 0% of the moon is illuminated to us. We cannot see it. It's in a perfect alignment in the cosmic heavens with the sun, moon, and star. The sun and the moon and the earth. And it is in an exact alignment in 0 degrees right now, pretty much, in that celestial astrological body of Taurus. So all of these things are aligned. So imagine that the new moon is like a fertile, dark womb that's ready to be impregnated. That is getting ready to be impregnated. So imagine that before you become pregnant, physically, traditionally, spiritually, metaphorically, you want to make sure that the womb is cleansed, that it's ready, that there's nothing that's going to get in the way to you creating a beautiful life in the womb, right? So if we think about the new moon from that perspective, I have a brand new moon cycle coming up, and I want to bring in something that's important to me. Don't I want to take some time to assess my life and get anything out of the way that can intervene with that? Yes, I do. So today is a time for assessing what can get in the way of your divine feminine. What can get in the way of you and your divine ori and your purpose and your destiny and your calling, right? What can get in the way of that? What can get in the way of this next goal that you have over the next lunar cycle, the next 28 and a half to 29 days? Assess what that is and cleanse it. Move it out of the way. In our Asheshe Orisha tradition, we do something called a rogasha whenever it's needed, where we cleanse our ori and we realign it with our destiny so that our mind, body, and spirit is focused and moving in one. So everybody doesn't have to do that. You can pray, you can take a cleansing shower, you can take a white bath, a Blanca bath. There's multiple things you can do, but the one thing you just need to know is that you need to cleanse. So when we started today, I had a little bit of copal and frankincense and myrrh doing that for us. So the alignment of our celestial bodies is allowing you to remove things that don't need to be there. If you're pregnant or expecting and you're watching this, this means that if your ori, your goddess highest self, if your divine purpose and your calling and your destiny is for you to have a healthy full-term pregnancy, you need to assess what are the things that are getting in the way of that. You know, is it attitudes, perceptions, people, current work environment, current provider? What is it? What's getting in the way? Let's purify it and move it out of the way by acknowledging that this is not giving what it needs to and it needs to move. Is it a relationship? What is it? Does it need to be redesigned or removed? And then I've shared in the past in our other oral archives, what are the things that you can do to remove it? You can write it down and burn it. You can meditate and do like a cord cutting where you acknowledge this thing and you are consciously cutting a cord and removing that from you. You can physically communicate like, hey, we're not going to move forward on this thing anymore. You can physically let a provider go that's not aligning with your goals. You can physically redesign a romantic relationship if they're not not being sensitive to your needs in a pregnancy. You can physically redesign your current career or work environment to advocate for yourself if the work environment is increasing the likelihood of not having a full-time healthy pregnancy. This is the time to do it. So but aligning and embodying the celestial power of the moon and all of the other celestial bodies in our home space. So our home, our physical space, is not just our home. We are literally living in a cosmic sphere. And every day, everything that we live around is communicating with us. But this is a special divine time for you to take advantage of what's ready to help you, and it costs nothing. So after you have recognized, oh, this is my Ori, this is my purpose, my destiny, my calling, who I am, I'm standing tall in my power, right? I know, so say for an example, I'm 1 week away from launching on May 5th, my newest book called The Black Midwife Oracle, which is chronicling the lives of 28 Black ancestral midwives. And it comes with a 28-card oracle deck and very deep biographies in an archival book about these midwives. It launches in 7 days on May 5th. So that's my Ori that is wise and brilliant and giving this gift to the world. That is my purpose, my destiny, and my calling to restore and archive and uplift sacred spiritual midwifery. So if I know that there are some things that can get in the way of a successful launch, today I'm going to stand strong and tall in my Ori, cleanse and align in my Ori, assess what those things are, get them out of the way, and then I'm going to activate and anoint the things that on this side that's going to help to bring power to what I need to call and get out into the world, okay? So wherever you are, if you're a parent, if you're a midwife, if you're a birth worker, this is how we show up. We don't just look at our calendar and say, I have this meeting tomorrow, I have that, I have this paper due, I have this grant due, I got to get my kids to the doctor, I got to cook dinner, I got to go to the grocery store, I got schoolwork, No. That is exactly how the system keeps us burnt out, overwhelmed, exhausted, right? And distracted from who we are. This oral archive and lunar gathering space is about activating, empowering, and inspiring you to walk in the path of our ancestors. And they knew how to be in their power and to remove the things that took away from it, okay? So that's what this new moon is about. I've shared a few times that new moon and full moon energy, you have 7 days of that energy, 3 days before the day of and 3 days after. So that is the wisdom, honoring and giving thanks for the new moon, the celestial body of Taurus, the star body of Taurus, that whenever you align with your full Ori power, your purpose, your destiny, your calling, that is going to bring abundance in all forms to your life, not just money, relationships, people who invest in you as much as you're investing in yourself. It's going to bring an abundance of ideas, abundance of connections. And the thing about Taurus is that it's resourceful, meaning that you help to stretch everything where it needs to go so that you get the fullness of everything, right? You get the best of your situations and not the worst of your situations. You're not just being extracted from, but you're being poured into. And then that overflow continues. You pour into you because you're in alignment with your Ori. That attracts this resourcefulness around you to where others are pouring into you, and that continues to overflow you to where you keep pouring out into the universe, and it keeps coming back to you, and you keep pouring out, and it comes back to you, and you pouring out, and you're never pouring from an empty cup because you're only surrounded with things that are calling your power to you, not away from you. So that is why we are finding ourselves in this state of exhaustion and burnout and being unhealthy, because also the current obstetrical system distracts us from who we are and what we should be doing. You're looking at prenatal visits and labs and ultrasounds and all of the mechanical things, and no one is sitting here assessing with you what should be happening. So on this path of sacred spiritual midwifery, as me being a priestess midwife, and also on the path of me training the next generation of midwives, our folk midwives and our birth priestesses, through my private midwifery educational pathways, we will not just learn how to be a midwife to someone else. We will learn and embody, not practice. There's a difference between practicing and embodying. I can go to midwifery school and practice midwifery, or I can embody midwifery, right? So you will learn how to embody midwifery for yourself, which is an art of living in alignment with nature and manifesting that energy and embodying that energy and invoking that energy for others to live abundantly within who they are. That's what we're doing. We're not doing this commercialized, corporatized version of midwifery. Okay? So that's that. Thank you, Taurus, celestial star system. Thank you, Venus, beautiful planet of divine femininity that reminds us to be nurturers and to nurture and to be poured into. And there's nothing wrong with resting in love and being invested in love. And thanks to our moon, who strategically shows us only one side, but revolves in ways that allows us to see all the sides of who we are. So I'm thankful for that. So I use an almanac that supports me in making sure that I'm giving you timely information. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to share with you before I get into our readings. I'm reading from 2 books today, specifically for the midwifery kind of oral archive part. But this morning, when I was sitting at my personal bookshelf, and I was called to my notebook, it also came to me to speak to the medicine of our animal family. But there was one animal from our animal family that wanted to speak. And I was like, okay. So first I started receiving a vision of my favorite kind of dog, which is a husky. I've never owned a husky, but I want a husky so bad. They just shed a lot. And I don't want to deal with that. I'm a soap maker and I work with herbs and medicine, and I don't want to deal with husky hair everywhere. But nonetheless, I get a vision of a husky and I'm like, okay. So I pick up the medicine of our faithful, loyal companions, the dog. And I was like, what you got to say today? What do we need to know today about dogs? Many of us love dogs, have had dogs. What do they want to say today? There's 2 things. And then I have some follow-up questions for us, okay? I'm so happy I'm in person and on video today. Typically, it's just my voice, but now y'all get to just to see me today. It won't always be this way, but thank goodness it's today. So, a little bit of medicine about our dogs is dog medicine. Ask you. Now get ready, because this snatched my African beads. Dog medicine asks you to look at how readily your sense of loyalty is countermanded by your need of approval. If you have kind of like came into this energy where you need to ask yourself again, how readily is your sense of loyalty countermanded by your need of approval? So what systems are we loyal to because we're seeking validation and approval? Are we loyal to ourselves? Are we loyal to other things because there's something in us that tells us that we're not enough and we need their approval to be enough? That is a weapon of white supremacy and colonialism, that we're not enough, and that we need a system to stamp their approval. And the wisdom and stories that I'm going to read from our ancestral midwives will prove that to you. That by us accepting this regulation that was forced upon us, it has made us want and need and desire their validation, while we're thrown away centuries of medicine and wisdom and embodied practices, to now where I am working collectively across the planet with other midwives to retrieve it. So again, before I go into the question that comes along with this statement, ask yourself to look at how readily your sense of loyalty is countermanded by your need of approval. Now, when I say it, just said it this time, Spirit told me, make sure that if you're pregnant and watching this, that you ask yourself that. Are you looking for the approval of a mother-in-law or a friend or your partner, or even society, that says that you're having your baby in a way that doesn't align with you? Do you want to have your baby in a special kind of way, but other people are intervening with that? Are you seeking their approval? Being disloyal to yourself? This new moon in Taurus calls you back. Remember, I said I'm calling you back. Calls you back to the loyalty to yourself. Seek your own approval. Approve of yourself. That is enough. The question: have I recently forgotten that I owe my allegiance to my personal truth in life? Back to RRE. What is your personal truth? Right? Many of us have to identify with the personal truth before we find out what our destiny and our calling is. I'm giving you a little bit of blueprint medicine here. The pathway. Many of us don't know what our destiny or callings are. I'm blessed to know mine. And I found out well over a decade ago, a couple decades ago. Okay? What got me to knowing my destiny and my calling was aligning with my personal truth, because I started to identify as a goddess. I aligned my Ori and I was like, this is what I believe in, and I don't care what anybody thinks. I believe in eating plant-based. I believe in adorning my body with essential oils from the earth. I believe in using herbs. I believe in respecting people. I believe in one love. I believe in moving my body. In me saying I believe in me, it naturally rejected. I naturally assessed what didn't need to be there. And then it allowed those things to move so that I was in alignment with my Ori and my personal truths of what I believed in. And then guess what happened after that? Boom. This is your destiny. Here's your destiny. I just got chills. Come on. This is your destiny, and this is your calling. Find your personal truth. I'm going to read that question again. Have I recently forgotten that I owe my allegiance to my personal truth in life? So that's a question. And then the last question that goes along with the medicine from our loyal canine dog friends. Have I been loyal and true to my goals? Again, it could be your goal in becoming a midwife. Me, I always wanted to be a traditional indigenous midwife, or practice as a traditional midwife indigenous to our original ways. So I went straight to Africa. I studied as a traditional birth attendant in Ghana, in Dutch community in Ghana. I talked about that in our first oral archive, I believe. And then I came back to the U.S. and I found out that I had to be validated and approved by a system that didn't even really see me in order to practice. So I did stay true to my goals, and I did train as a spiritual and an indigenous midwife, but then I had to take on the mask of society and train as a certified professional midwife and get in their system. And the deeper I got in the system, they know it. Because, I said, I'm going to keep all my traditional spiritual practices. And even though I'm taking this pathway, I ain't really going to do all that stuff. They know it. It's so strong that you barely get your sacred spiritual things out. Okay? So was I loyal and true to my original goals? Yeah, I was in a way. But now I'm calling me back fully. I'm not with that. I'm not with it. I was not trained about spiritual, sacred, pre-colonial midwifery embodiment practices in any of my midwifery placements. I studied, traveled all over the world, had multiple midwife preceptors, home birth, hospital births, birth center births, you name it. I deliver babies in hospitals as a CPM, you name it. Okay? I'm calling my power back. So just like I've decided to leave the commercialized, commodified, colonialized midwifery path to step into my power as the sacred spiritual path, there's something in your life that this new moon, as a mother, as an expecting mother, as a midwife, as a birth worker, as a spiritual person, as a healer, as a human on this earth, there's something this new moon is asking you to move out of your way to align with who you are. All right. So the follow-up questions that I had after I read that and was like, oh dang, was you asking yourself, what is my personal truth? So that you can get to your destiny and your calling. Your Ori is saying to you today, ask yourself, what is my personal truth? Do I know? Do I know what that is? Am I unwavering in my personal truth? Am I unwavering in my personal truth around how I want to give birth to my baby? Am I unwavering in my personal truth and how I want to practice as a midwife, a birth companion support person, as a doula? Am I unwavering in my personal truth in my path to elevation as a priestess? Am I unwavering in my personal truth and my path and how I parent my children, in my path and how I love myself, in my path of how I feed and nourish myself, in my path and how I love my partner? What is my personal truth? Am I living it? All right. That's another question for you. And this leads us to the next bit of medicine of not following. Because what gets us quickly away from our own goddess, God body, our own power and our purpose is following others. I ain't never been a follower. I'll be by myself before I follow somebody. But when you're by yourself and you're bold and you're powerful and the system finds a way to say, not too fast. I got a regulation for you. I was about to cuss. I got a regulation for you. I'm about to regulate you to be how I want you to be. And if you live in a value system where you can only do your calling through their system, then you have to follow it. So I wanted to follow my way in becoming a midwife, but for 4 years, I followed the CPM MEEK accredited pathway. I followed them. And when you follow something that you know does not align with your full truth, it can get you off the path little by little. Now, I've still been successful. I've still built that, inspired this, trailblazed that, pioneered this, but it slowly moved me away from my personal truth. And I had to recognize that and call myself back. So now I'm not practicing under that profession in that way. Those credentials will not remain much longer. You know what I'm saying? I'm not supporting midwifery and birthing through that system in that way. That's why I have my private pathway of the folk midwife and birth priestess, right? So, and then I have my public offerings where I'm teaching people how problematic following a system that does not align with the personal truths of many. So the final thing is understanding what is my personal truth and then not following others, following other systems that don't align with your personal truth. Okay. All right. So that is that medicine. Now we have a little under 20 minutes because I spent about an hour with you all. And we're going to go through a couple of books in our last bit of time together today. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared thus far. I hope you have. Let me get a little bit of water. Okay. So last oral archive, I talked a bit about the moon and how traditionally we count our due date based on the moon. So I'm going to break that down a little bit finer today, specifically because we are in a new moon. And traditionally, before we had artificial lighting and before we lived in houses that weren't made of earth, and like our houses currently are made out of fabricated materials, and it shields us from the earth instead of inviting the earth to live with us, within us. So now our moon cycles are all kind of over the place. But one thing remains is that if you live with women or a group of women, hormonally you tend to sync up together because of your pheromones. So whoever has the strongest pheromones will align all the other women up and you all menstruate together. So that is something that has never changed. So traditionally, women menstruated during the new moon when those planets lined up together. And they would all menstruate together in a menstrual hut. And that was their sacred time of envisioning and gathering and resting. While the husbands and the people who weren't menstruating, the maidens, while they took care of the children and the compounds and all of those things. So using the 10 moon methodology for determining a due time, scrap the due date. It's not a date. Okay, for one, it's a Gregorian calendar. Let's call it that. It's a Gregorian calendar made by a white man recently. The earth is millions, billions of years old. We don't need the Gregorian calendar to tell us how our ancient sacred bodies are going to birth and when they're going to birth. We have the moon. We know we're 3/4 water. Made as humans are made of all of the elements that the cosmic heavens are made of. We're 3/4 water. When we become pregnant, we have an ocean in our belly. So I have an ocean on top of being 3/4 water. My blood volume increases by 50%. That's more water, right? Got oceans and seas and lakes and streams all up in our body. The moon is the best indicator of when my baby is going to come, not your Gregorian calendar and your calculations that you all have made up. Let's follow the moon. I am reading from a book for midwives. It says a manual for traditional birth attendants and community midwives, and it's a Hesperian Foundation book, and they are the publishers of the book of Where There Is No Doctors. And I have that book here, and it's also really good. I want to grab it off the shelf, but in honor of time, next time. So without using a Gregorian calendar, okay, you can find the due date of your baby by using the moon. For those of us who are coming out of the cloak and control of, the current white mainstream consumerism and medical industrial complex, doing something as simple as tracking when did I last menstruate? Not the Gregorian date, not April 18th was the last time the first day of my last menstrual cycle. No. Get a almanac. I love Llewellyn's almanacs because I've been using Llewellyn's almanacs, I think since like 2008 or something like that. But they'll give you the date, and then you have the Gregorian calendar date, and then you have what quarter of the moon is. We have 4 main quarters: first, second, third, fourth quarter. And then it also has the symbol of the zodiac, so you can start memorizing the symbols of the zodiac and not the actual name. It tells you about any other planetary placements, but you will know what phase the moon was in and what sign the moon was in. So you can write down in your journal, the first day of my last menstrual cycle was the Taurus New Moon. Boom. And then you can write the Gregorian date if you want. And that means that 10 new moons from that day. So it's a 10 moon cycles. So 10 more new moon cycles is your due time, your due space, your due realm. I like that. Due realm. Okay. That's the realm of time that you will be due. And it can stretch on both ends. So for an example, if your bleeding started on the full moon, you probably got pregnant on the new moon. And then so that means that, let me see here. It says if a woman's monthly bleeding is usually about 1 moon, 4 weeks apart. So every 4 weeks, you're going to have another menstrual cycle. So if your monthly bleeding is usually about 1 month, the baby is due exactly 10 moons after the first day of your last monthly bleeding. If a woman's monthly bleeding starts on a quarter moon, that is when the moon is waxing and 25% full. That's like your waxing quarter. Then the baby is due 10 quarter moons, 10 waxing quarter moons later. If your bleeding started on a new moon, the baby is due 2 new moons later, and so on and so forth. So, and then it gives a cute little image down at the bottom here that you can see of that. Okay? All right. So I wanted to share that on this special new moon day to remind you to take good care of yourselves when you're menstruating. You should rest the first or second day of your menstrual cycle. Light a red candle. Let the people in your house or your sacred close circle know that you're menstruating. You would love for them to care for you a little bit more. You know, running the errands, doing the laundry, cooking food so that you can rest those first 2 days and dream and envision. Okay? Now, I'm going to read a couple of things from this book. It's called The Archaeology of Mothering, an African-American Midwife's Tale by Laurie Wilkie. Love this book. It's an archival book of midwifery, and it has just stories of midwifery, not biographies, but it talks about the practices of some of the midwives. So I'm going to read just a little bit from here. Okay, I'm starting on page 126, and it says, accounts of pre-regulation midwifery suggest that midwives, as part of their practice, created and employed a number of traditional remedies, ranging from herbal and animal product teas to tonics and bitters. Annie Lee Logan, in 1989, said of her mother's midwifery practice, in those days, the doctors didn't tell them what to do. They used the old home remedies, mostly come from the Indian remedies. The midwife then would always carry her herbs that she was going to make teas out of to give them something warm to drink. They made teas out of this and teas out of that and drank it all down through the times. That Lucretia Perryman, who is a midwife frequently talked about in this book, she produced medicines including alcohol-based herbal remedies and possible food medicine. And so this can be inferred from 3 types of archaeologic evidence that was found on her land, including the abundance of liquor containers, the presence of napped glass scrapers, and the faunal assemblage from the site. So whiskey was something that was commonly named by African-American storytellers who mentioned in oral histories that it was an important ingredient in home remedies. And we know whiskey and spirits to be an important ingredient in making botanical infusions known as herbal extracts. And so we know that our midwives didn't just use teas, as mentioned by Annie Lee Logan. They also use well-preserved and potent herbal elixirs or extracts that were healing and therapeutic and very useful. So they were wise and experienced in that way. So I'm now reading from page 130 at the bottom, and it says, in Logan's statement, Annie Lee Logan, we see both a distancing from and a justification for the use of traditional medicine. Her attitudes are similar to those expressed by women involved in Litt's 2000 study of scientific mothering on African American women, a subject that she, in this book, will explore later in a chapter. Annie Lee Logan also illustrates the creativity of midwifery, the way that new products were used in similar ways to replace the older remedies. Lucretia Perryman's midwifery practice provides evidence of this process. As a midwife trained during the period of regulation, midwife Annie Lee Logan would have learned that she could not publicly support the use of such medicines herself at the risk of losing her license. Yet at the same time, she would have found herself wanting to fill the request of her patients. Her comments also demonstrate that birth was a multi-generational event involving women of many ages. Now, midwife Margaret Charles Smith expressed similar sentiments in her consideration of traditional teas. She expressed frustration with the fact that her midwifery training, which dictated that she use no traditional remedies, was at odds with the wishes of her patients who requested the old products. When she obliged and provided traditional remedies, other patients heard of the medicines and requested them as well. With the notoriety that came with the powerful healing came the increased chance that regulatory agents would hear that she was violating the terms of her license. Smith stated, "I had to stop fooling with teas and things in labor because my name was getting out. Miss Margaret, how come you are not using some of that stuff you used on Emma of Lucille? She was telling me about what good stuff you had. Why don't you give me some? Fix some for me so I can get through with this baby." Smith admitted that she had been practicing as a midwife for some time before she stopped dispensing traditional medicines. Midwives found themselves caught between two sets of expectations, those of the regulatory agencies and those of their patients. They mediated between these competing demands as best they could, but because they were stripped of the power to work according to what their own experiences had taught them, they served neither group as effectively as they would have liked. So a pause there, because what we are hearing is that white saviors who wanted to save us from our ways that were powerful, beautiful, and ours, they belong to us. They studied what we were doing. They appeared as helpful servants, but they studied what we were doing. They documented all of our spiritual sacred work through midwifery. And then they created their own systemic ways that included extracting and removing our practices and taking it out of our hands and saying we could no longer use them, right? And regulating that into law and saying that you can only use physical medical things. So now they've converted birth from a spiritual, sacred, ceremonial process to a medical interventive process. And now they know everything that we do, how we do it, where we get it from, all of that. And now it has been commercialized and commodified. So we need to get back. One of the messages that came to me this morning, and I may have briefly mentioned it, we need to get back to our secret, sacred pathways of midwifery, which is why the birth priestess and folk midwife pathway through the midwifery folklorist, that's why it's a private membership organization, because you have to understand that, have we not learned that when we over publicize and commodify our sacred spiritual practices like they're currently being on the internet, all of our stuff is out there. There's a dollar price tag to everything. When we're selling our stuff that way, it's easier for them to take it and remove it to where legally we cannot utilize it. So with that being said, it's time to return back to our sacred pathways in honor of traditional and indigenous midwifery, so it can never be taken and removed from us again. So in light of that, we understand that the mothers and the babies miss out on the most. It says here that neither group were served effectively as they would have liked. Women were asking for the traditional old remedies and sacred spiritual ways. So even though the midwives was like, hey, look, I'm not supposed to be doing this, so keep this on the down low, people were still telling everyone. And we have to understand those white savior public health nurses were coming into the communities. They may bring a little blanket, a little block of cheese, something to dangle in a recent mother's face and say, hey, how did your birth go with Miss Margaret? I brought you something. How did it go? And so we maybe unknowingly was snitching on the midwife. And even though Miss Margaret has a a part of her midwifery bag where the floor drops down into a secret compartment, and she's hiding what she's bringing, and she's telling the public health nurses, like, no, I ain't bringing my root, my conjure, my magic, my power to help this mama. I just got the good old stuff, this stuff that we really don't want, but that you told us to have. But then we have the women still saying, no, I got this and I got that. So we unfortunately help to throw the midwives under the bus and help with the demise of our sacred spiritual practices. So we need to be quiet. It's not only a time for Black folks to rest because of the current political climate. We also need to be quiet about our sacred ways. So there's a little bit more that I'm going to read here. We have here as well that ideally, I'm reading from page 131. It says prenatal care and preparations. Ideally, from a midwife's perspective, a woman would visit a midwife when she first suspected she was pregnant, and the midwife would estimate a delivery date and recommend ways for the woman to care for herself during pregnancy. Midwives complained, however, women frequently maybe did not approach them until it was time to give birth, and there were a myriad of reasons for that. So Annie Lee Logan in 1989 recognized that lack of good nutrition, little to no prenatal care, and harsh work conditions led to the increased complications and mortality rates for African American women, and disputed the notion that difficult deliveries were not the fault of the midwife. So if we understand that new term, social determinants of health, that is saying that based off of what humans have access to, especially minorities, it's going to impact the health and well-being of them. So if you have new regulations that's telling traditional lineage-based midwives that have been practicing for centuries in their life, if you are now telling these midwives that they cannot practice, and so now women don't have access to midwives in their community, work conditions are poor, people aren't getting compensated in the ways that they should, people are working more than they should, so there's time poverty, so they don't have the luxury, it shouldn't be called a luxury, but they don't have the ability to access early prenatal care because of these issues. Maybe a midwife was erased from their community and they're forced to go to a clinic or a hospital that's too far away. They can't afford to pay the doctor, so on and so forth. Doctors were paid $50 for birth versus $5 or $10 for a midwife, or versus a bushel of of hay or corn or food or chicken or something else. So with that being said, we understood that the midwives were being blamed for things that were out of the control of the midwife and the parent, and that were actually institutionalized from the system and the harsh treatments of African American people. So I'm going to wrap up here with something beautiful. There is a practice called fussing, because the midwives will fuss all over the mothers to make them look beautiful and all of that before giving birth. And this practice has a little bit of reverence now, where women go and get their labor braids and stuff. You may get a nice little outfit, but there was something special about you being adorned by a midwife before your birth. And this practice was actually regulated out of traditional midwifery, and we need to get back to it. So here we go with our last reading for today's Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space. This is also on page 131 at the bottom under Labor and Pain Management. The midwife would be sent for once contractions began. Midwives often recall being sent for at all times of the day or night. During the early stages of labor, midwives engaged in what later public health officials would refer to as fussing. Fussing involved beautifying a woman's body in preparation for the transformative event of birth. A woman's hair was braided and pomaded, her calves and legs were oiled, her arms and groin were talcum powdered, and her person was sprinkled with sweet water or perfume. Mongo, in 1985, describes fussing items such as cocoa butter, rose water, talcum powder, toilet waters and perfumes, pomades, face creams, and sweet soaps as some of the items banned from midwives' bags following regulation. The toilet waters, perfumes, and creams that were discussed in the previous chapter could have been used in Perryman's, who is midwife Lucretia Perryman's, it could have been used in her midwifery practice as easily as by her family. Fussing has psychological as well as ritual functions. The rubbing, combing, and massaging will relax and comfort the mother and provide a distraction during the first stage of labor, which can go on for hours. Ritually, the body is made beautiful in anticipation. Okay, sorry about that. Let me get back to my spot. Okay. The rubbing, combing, and massaging would relax and comfort the mother and provide a distraction during the first stage of labor, which can go on for hours. Ritually, the body is made beautiful in anticipation of greeting the new child. Strong positive smells can counteract any ill will or malevolent spirits that may linger in any area. Okay? So we have to understand that the ritual around adorning the body of the mother has psychological effects of feeling ready, prepared, and beautiful, and loved on and adorned. She's being massaged with special oils. She smells good. And we know that even in the Christian tradition, there's something that says cleanliness is next to godliness. So we're getting ready to bring in a new life. And so in doing so, by being fussed over, that really, really helps to call in a higher power. So having that removed from our practices was really detrimental to our community. And so we need to bring that back. And having the midwife, who is the guardian over the portal of childbirth, to do that is also very special. So the last thing I'll say is about May water, because we're a few days away from May. Traditionally, the first rain in May was looked at as a very special sacred water that helped to beautify a person and call in sacred energy and power. So that is something that's also talked about in this book, and it says on page 133 that African American beliefs regarding the curative powers of May water, which is the first rain waters to fall in the month of May, have been compatible with traditional beliefs. And so we understand that May water was also used in childbirth. So I say this to say that this new moon, we have received multiple different pieces of wisdom and prayers and medicine and things for us to work through. Just as a brief recap, we understand that today we really focused on standing strong, planting our feet straight into the earth, getting into that fertile land of this new moon, and understanding that our Ori is our first goddess, our first god, that is our higher power, and that we need to keep our Oris clear. In our tradition, we do rogatias to clear the Ori after something intense or traumatic or disassociative happens. We understand that whenever we understand what our personal truth is, that it helps to align us with our destiny and our calling. And we understand that when we are aligned with our Ori, our personal truth, our destiny, and our calling, it allows us to assess what isn't for us and what's extracting for us and pulling us away from those things. And once you remove those things that are distracting you, it can help to align you better with your calling and destiny and personal truth. And that helps you to get to pour into yourself. And it helps you also to attract people who will pour into you so that you can stay full and overflowing and you're not exhausted and burnt out. We also understood that we need to ask ourselves a few questions, and those questions really relate to us standing strong in our power. So asking yourself, what is my personal truth? Asking yourself, have I been loyal and true to my goals? Asking yourself, have I recently forgotten that I owe my allegiance to my personal truth in life, right? So those are those questions. And also just thinking about that loyalty medicine around, who are you loyal to? Have I been loyal to myself, or am I being loyal to others? more than myself. And so also understanding that we need to return to secrecy. We need to turn to sacred protection of our work. Everything does not need to be on social media and online. I'm already calling back my power, as I said in the beginning, and assessing what have I unconsciously or unintentionally put out online that needs to be called back. And we will be meeting in person to do our sacred spiritual practices that does not belong in the public eye. Have we not learned? Okay, so I leave you with all of these beautiful, timely, and aligned wisdom during our 4th Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Now, I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, okay? So in 2 weeks, we will have a full moon that will be in Scorpio. Actually, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right information, looking at my almanac that I recommend you have. But on Monday, May 12th, we will have a full moon at 11:56 p.m. Central Time, and that full moon will, yes, be in Scorpio. That is called our flower moon. So I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Now, you take good care of yourself. This has been the Midwifery Folklorist, Priestess Okunchola. I'm a dude. I'll see you soon.